A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to the channel once again. Here we are at it with some more countdown related media. Today is September 20th, 2021, and 19 days ago I went ahead and made myself another countdown, which of course was based on the many different films that were released for 2021. But now's the time that I answer another question that somebody else had in mind. They basically asked me, why haven't I done a countdown based on the Nerf blasters that I currently own in the collection? After a lot of updates, after a lot of sacrifices, and after a lot of careful selections, I found out that, well, there are tons of blasters that I still own after all these changes I've had to make through the collection over the past 10 months or so. It's now about time that I get down to the 15 best Nerf blasters I currently own and the 15 worst Nerf blasters I currently own. I will probably have to settle on one or the other. So for today, September 20th, let's get on with the 15 best Nerf blasters that I own right now. And I'm really gonna say, there are tons of different selections to choose from, which of course made it a bit difficult at first, but given all of the context that I've currently disclosed to the channel and to all the viewership that I've had lately, it's about time that I pick 15 blasters that I feel like are great. Reality is that there are too many selections, because since I've just been a big super fan of Nerf, both as a collector, as a reviewer, as a player, and most importantly, as a filmmaker, which of course, I'm actually going to be going into the works of Nerf Secret Revealed Part 2. Bolts of Intrigue probably could have been done better, but at this point I'm willing to make the sequels even bigger and better. So, it's about time that I cash in on that whole entire thing by first diving on into the 15 best Nerf blasters that I currently own. Number 15. Elite SureStrike. This blaster, as you might already know, is in fact a reskin of the Zombie Strike Clearshot, that of which itself was a reskin of another blaster, the Dart Tag Stormfire. And I'm referring to the 2005 edition of the Dart Tag lineup itself, and not the 2011 Resurgence lineup, which of course had different blasters as a whole. The SureStrike, of course, being the most recent reskin that has come out. And you never know, there could be others on the way soon, but at this moment, a blaster like this that utilizes, well, basic handgun style performance in a way, and has the ability to store up to 5 darts at once. 1 on the hand grip, 2 below the muzzle, 1 directly below the barrel, and then 1 in the barrel itself. So for the most part, being an elite blaster, the claims of course are settled upon as both 60 to 75 feet. But for the most part, average range claims are probably at the best that I could possibly find on something like this. It's also important to note that this blaster also came equipped with a red dot sight, which is not attached as you can tell, but otherwise, this is basically like a Stormfire 3.0. So in a pinch, I will certainly call this a great blaster by any means. A more modernized version of the Stormfire and an upgrade over the Clearshot certainly does make for quite a handy sidearm that you can use in any battle, whether it be HVZ or any other sorts of basic Nerf battle whatsoever. Number 14. Accustrike Raptor Strike. Now, just like always, this thing is so big, you cannot really fit it into the frame successfully. At least with the kind of camera I own at this point, it seems debatable in a way. But it more or less depends on how you hold it. Yeah, this seems to be the best way to hold it, so I could fit it within the entire frame itself. Well anyways, an Accustrike sniper rifle, well, what a handy idea, but it does almost come at a cost. Aside from the very long, almost ridiculous length, but of which there have been lots of experiments out there where people have tried to create even longer Nerf blasters, but this Raptor Strike itself does have quite a nice amount of quirks in it, including some satisfying action. Of course, it's got some pretty small bolt action pieces on them, with some nice, well, grippy action on them, very akin to most tools. Then, of course, its usage of its own type of 6-dart clips. One is opaque, one side is transparent, which of course will allow you to see the darts, just in case you might need to reload at any given point. Not to mention its clip storage, in which mine in fact came equipped with a second clip on it. So 2 clips in total for the Raptor Strike, both of which can hold 6 darts. But the biggest thing about this was the insane price deals I managed to get on this. The bargains on the Raptor Strike these days, especially on most e-commerce platforms, are ridiculously impressive. This one in particular came equipped with a few bonuses, was brand new in box, priced for only $17.99, which is unbelievable. Like, how would you be able to find a Raptor Strike these days that's only $18? Something like this would be at least double that price. But given the fact that a lot of people are more or less willing to try and sell these things at their original price tags or even higher because of how high most blaster values have been over the past few years, it probably does make sense. Some people are wanting to get rid of these quickly, and I was glad to pick one of these up in fresh, brand new, factory-like quality, which is just impressive. Kind of a rare scenario in a way. To know this thing is also equipped with a few other things. This thing also has its own bipod, which I don't have, obviously. Also has a flip-up sight, which is much different than that of many others that we've seen so far. Otherwise, an impressive color scheme, some pretty nice sound that takes place, both when it comes to priming, firing, reloading the blasters. It's like music to my ears in a way. Also, this is one of those rare cases where you can still use the blaster while the jam door is open. Having 24/7 access through the inner compartment in the chamber is going to be pretty handy, because having to only open it during emergencies might seem silly in a way. You might forget that there could be a jam happening, so to have this thing open and ready for anything can be helpful. Number 13, the Alphastrike Otter QS4. But of course I've renamed it to the Otter QS4. So, Alphastrike Otter QS4. This blaster, of course, may seem unlucky for the most part. It is almost an unfortunate thing that I pretty much have to include an Alphastrike blaster into a top countdown based on the best blasters that I have. But you know what? This is one of those very rare scenarios that I somehow find something decent in this blaster. Of all the blasters I've had the chance to review, this one actually did meet a lot of my expectations and even exceeded them. I did not really have a whole lot of grudges against this compared to many other Alphastrike blasters, but of all models I've had to pick out, this one could be the best. But of course, you never know. Maybe the Alphastrike series might get even better over time. This is, of course, little more than a simple reskin of the Fang QS4, which that of itself was merely a copycat of the Zombie Strike Quadra QS4. So, as big of a conundrum as that might sound, this right here doesn't really pose itself as too big of an enigma, because being a ripoff of the Fang, which was in its own family, but still having a lot of differences in it, including a more refined, comfortable grip inside of it, some more smoother priming, and some more serious firing. Not to mention, the darts easily hold themselves in the chamber pretty snugly. So they don't really have any tendency to fall out. Also, with the look of this blaster entirely, it's hard to believe that something like this came from the Alphastrike series, which has been known for being rather criminally cheap in quality and in tone. It was Nerf's way of cashing in on the massive success of its competitors, being cheaper yet better, somehow, some way. As for the Otter QS4, a ripoff of the Fang, which that was a ripoff of the Quadrat, this one actually does so much better. Also, you can't forget, a scope on a 4-barreled pistol. How could you forget that? Scopes don't really serve much other than just aesthetics. But, yeah, you pretty much hear that all along, and you'd pretty much feel like you're holding on to a much better weapon. Wow, there's the twirl factor in it. But anyways, that seems to be how it is with something like this. Number 12. The rival Artemis. This blue Artemis, in fact, is my Artemis. Most specifically, a much bigger piece of machinery than I could have ever anticipated. Being a Rivals blaster means it utilizes rival HIR rounds, and this particular blaster can hold up to 30 of them at a time. And then of course you gotta remember this Gatling sort of barrel configuration in which it can be used to turn itself around just with the simple priming of this forward grip right here. And then of course, the utilization of this piece right here as a way to open up this hatch, which allows this hopper-like compartment to be filled up. The Artemis itself, being a Rivals blaster, obviously does have a few things to it. Morally the fact that it includes a safety switch to shut off the blaster in case you do not want it to be in any sort of danger to any other people. They might end up getting their hands on it, and eventually it could be rather destructive. But otherwise, it does seem that of all the ones I've talked about, this one could at least be declared the best right on the spot. And yet there are others out there that seem to be very compelling, rather competitive in a way. Number 11, the Doomlands Negotiator. Doomlands 2169 is that typical sort of urban dystopian sort of thing that happens in the distant future. It's that classic cliche that has been better represented in things like Mad Max and Blade Runner, just as a few examples. But Doomlands itself does have a pretty good line of blasters to choose from, and this of course would be one of those. I do have that sort of impression that this is not just any sort of 8-round cylinder revolver. The Negotiator does in fact have quite a few details to it. It has the signature side where it's transparent as opposed to the other side which is just opaque. This is just one of a few trademarks that Doomlands utilizes to make these blasters unique in any possible way. Alright, that didn't fire well. There we go. Also, you gotta remember that aside from typical aesthetics, that color scheme pretty much is a bit vibrant. Despite the fact that the yellow does not seem to contrast with the orange very well to me, as the Alphastrike series pretty much did. But when you really look at it with the gray, black, and then the transparent sort of colors, they seem to blend well together. And then of course, well, the utilization of a side grip as opposed to the grip that's utilized for your trigger finger, combined with the hammer action, does make this thing easy to handle. Yeah, if you pretty much just saw right there, the fact that you can easily breeze through this entire blaster with 8 cylinders, 8 darts to fit up to, it really does show that you truly do have a lot that you could potentially work with. Can easily decimate an enemy in just seconds. Number 10, Elite 2.0 Commander, but of which, you know me, Super Corrector. This blaster in and of itself may be like a modern Spectre, but this one certainly is quite a bit better, so to speak. Not only for the fact that this was basically the first of a new generation of blasters, this was in fact the first of its kind. This lineup started with this exact blaster, a Spectre-like clone, but in and of itself has been designed a whole lot differently, mostly with all the details and molding and pieces that are present on this blaster. You also got to look at all the tactical rails this uses. 1, 2, 3. I've always had conflicting feelings about putting a tactical rail on the handguard right here at the bottom, because how would you be able to work with this? But then again, with these other two, you can really work with this thing as well. Also, this thing's even more modular than you might suspect, having both a stock adapter and a barrel adapter. I have attached barrels and stocks to this thing before, and they do seem to blend in well. This being a core blaster, one of many big examples of modular connectivity, is really quite a big thing. Especially, of course, when you really compare it to the Modulus lineup as a whole. Modulus may have done it better, but this series tends to pretty much pick up pretty much from where it left off back in 2019 with the Tracker. But in 2020 and onwards, considering how many blasters we already have in this lineup as a whole, I'd say it's probably only going to continue getting bigger and possibly even better. But for this blaster as a whole, being more than just a simple clone, is probably going to be hard for me to explain. But then again, if there's something that the Spectre did not indeed have, then well, that sums it up for you. I consider this to be better than many others for these exact reasons. So, moving on. Number 9. The Mega Motostrike. Here we have yet another big blaster that may not really fit in the frame correctly, but hey, you know what? Let's give it all we got right here. I currently have this thing equipped with the Centurion magazine because I am utilizing smaller magazines as a way for some of these blasters to be able to fit on the wall. And I gotta say, this is one rare scenario. As you might already know, the Centurion and Motostrike are the only two Mega Blasters we have that utilize clip system capabilities. And considering how both of them came with their own different clips, this one was for the Centurion, but the one for the Motostrike was able to fit 10 darts, 4 more than the Centurion, and it was designed a whole lot differently for the Motostrike. Even though, of course, it's not equipped onto this, but still, just the fact that I know that this actually works is pretty spectacular, so to speak. Well, hey, that's a pretty nice way of connectivity that proves that it's very convenient. Also, well, here we have yet another big example. The combination of this being a Mega Clip System Blaster and a motorized Mega Blaster. This is also the second motorized Mega Blaster that we have out there, with the first one technically being the Mastodon, as far as I pretty much know about it. The majority of the other Mega Blasters are non-battery operated, and therefore not motorized. So for the most part, this really does exceed at giving us quite a big combination of things that have not been back for a while. The Centurion at the time was the only clip system blaster for the Mega lineup, and the Mastodon was the only motorized Mega Blaster, but this one brings both of these elements back together to make one big new Mega Blaster. Well, not so new nowadays, but when you really get down to it, this really is quite a big deal, because it proves that Hasbro can truly go back to their roots and definitely give us something new that can somehow be better in so many different ways. The ergonomics of this blaster are unbelievable when you really think about it. They're almost like Raptor Strike quality, or even Rapid Strike quality, or maybe even with other blasters of this sort that came out around the same time. But speaking of which, well, it's about time that I actually go ahead to move on to some of the bigger and better blasters that I have in my collection. Number 8. The Ultra Amp, Ultra 10. Yeah, it's getting too ridiculous, it makes no sense anyways. This Ultra Blaster being the 10th release so far, with many other Ultra Blasters that became a bit of a controversy, this one in particular happens to do a couple different things. Well, that was not very well executed, but anyways, this was in fact another Ultra Blaster that we got right now that utilizes clip system technology. Of course, the Mega System still has a lot to learn when it comes to clip system usage in blasters, but it seems that Hasbro was able to learn quite a lot by utilizing Ultra clip system technology within only a year after they started. So I guess that's pretty much what the purpose of a ladder of trial and error is like. And utilizing this to the best of any company's advantage can be pretty helpful in building a brighter future. But for this entirely, the usage of this being modular had never pretty much been thought of. Although of course tactical rails have appeared in the majority of other Ultra Blasters, in this case, well, the purpose is kind of defeated with the usage of an integrated red dot sight. And then of course there's a stock adapter. Sure, you could put other different types of accessories on other Ultra Blasters, and there is actually one that's even better than this. But just for the fun of it, I had to fire a couple of rounds on here. So for the most part, being an SMG sort of appearance makes this Ultra Blaster very likely. And for the cost, I'd say it's worth picking up. Any kind of Ultra Blaster, honestly, is worth picking up because there's a lot of apologies that need to be sent out to that series. After so many wrongs that have happened, Nerf finally has the evidence they have to prove that the Ultra system is a right. An absolute right. So, that's all I gotta say there. Number 7. The Zombiestrike Ravenger. In all honesties, I consider this to be one of the best Zombiestrike blasters I've ever owned so far. This one, of all the Zombiestrike blasters, really happens to take quite a hint from the Modulus lineup because by the end of 2018, Modulus was kind of in its dying sort of year, at the same time that the Rebel lineup was also facing extinction, after it had tried to bond together with the Accustrike series and kind of failed, in a way. The Rebel series died out, and the Modulus series eventually started to fade off and eventually die out as well, but it pretty much left a little surprise. The Zombiestrike survival system, which only included 2 different blasters, much like with how the Doomlands Impact Zone initially had 2 blasters in it at the time, and then Alien Menace had only 2 blasters in it, with a third eventually being added before it would be discontinued prematurely. The Ravenger, though, of all big examples of Zombiestrike blasters, and of course of all examples of blasters utilizing sling technology with lever action, really does hold up so much better than any other that I've ever had the chance to talk about. The Zombiestrike Sling Fire at the time was the first big example, released in 2014. But 4 years later, here comes the Ravenger, a major upgrade over the Sling Fire, and for good reasons. The first thing here is it features a detachable stock, which also included its little double-barrel jolt-like sidearm, which as you can see is unavailable. It was one of many blasters that I had to loan out for the Paranoia session that had happened earlier this summer. But anyways, it also included a pretty big plethora of other accessories. A scope, a clip holder, a barrel. I tell you, this thing was jam-packed with all sorts of modular accessories and all that good stuff. The survival system got a second blaster eventually called the Nail Biter, but man, was that thing trashed. Although it did have its own way of becoming modular just like this. But anyways, this blaster, I might as well just consider the best to come out of lever action blasters that we got so far. And for this pretty much being modular, in a way. A zombie strike blaster that has some Modulus-like capabilities is one thing. And then of course there's lever action being another, and a detachable stock, including its own sidearm as a little bonus, is yet another big example right here. But, well, here comes the best example of all. The blaster's functionality gets even better when you basically flip this switch here, and, well, you don't even need to hold on to the trigger for this, because, yeah, basically, it works like a typical slamfire blaster. The only big example of a zombie strike blaster, a lever action blaster, and all that good stuff, utilizing slamfire capabilities. A zombie strike lever action blaster having slamfire capabilities really ousts many other examples out there that we've seen so far. And yeah, this thing is just a pure masterpiece in its own way. One of the only survival system blasters out there in the Zombie Strike lineup, one of the only high-class modular blasters in the Zombie Strike lineup, and one of the only lever action blasters to appear in the Zombie Strike lineup, and one of the only lever action slamfire blasters in general. And that's really saying a lot. Go ahead and pick one up if you can. I'm sure that they probably sell these on eBay on the cheap as well. So, yeah. But I tell you, it's only going to get better from here on out. Because now it's time to move on to number 6, pretty much. The rival Saturn. Yeah, this is way better than that of the Ravenger. And for a couple of reasons. Number 1, well, it's a rival shotgun. Also, if you're not familiar with the color scheme on this sort of highlighter chartreuse green gives away the fact that this is one of only a few current existing examples of a blaster from the rival Edge series. And the Edge series is known for having their own exclusive green colored rounds to basically match up with the majority of the body paint, which is this nice highlighter chartreuse sort of color scheme. I can't entirely be sure how specific I could possibly be with this, but anyways, well, like all Rivals blasters, this does use a safety switch. And then, well, as simple as that pretty much is, it actually gets a little bit better because of all Rival shotguns out there, this is what can probably be better. Yeah. The biggest thing about this blaster though, if being an Edge blaster, being a slamfire shotgun blaster, and being a blaster that can hold a large amount of HIR rounds, if that's not impressive enough, then well, think about this. This blaster alone gives away a lot of vibes based on the video game The Last of Us Part 2. As a matter of fact, Ellie's pump shotgun, which is used, a Remington police style pump shotgun, as a matter of fact, this is very reminiscent to it. This blaster came out in August 2020, 2 months after the game itself did, in June 2020. And the thing is, either Nerf was being inspirational from the game itself, or it was just a total coincidence. I don't exactly know how, but this is probably the big link that I can probably put together. And as you know, I really get a kick out of some amazing, awesome weapons out of different video games. And of all the weapons from The Last of Us Part 2, the pump shotgun, quite possibly, has the scariest sound to it, but it's that sort of exciting sort of notion that gets a pretty big kick out of something like that. It may sound like a total nightmare, but the gun itself in the game was very powerful. And I could certainly feel that sort of power, vibe, and connectivity within the game just by holding onto this blaster. Just knowing that the pump is pretty much the same. Well, safety was off. And then of course you got firing pretty much being the same. I tell you, you really get a lot of kicks out of The Last of Us Part 2 just by holding onto this blaster. But whether or not you might want to think about that kind of weapon in that game, it's probably up to you. I consider this to be way better than many others simply because of that sort of connectivity and maybe even that conspiracy in general. Number 5. Well, here we go. Yet another shotgun style blaster. One that many people would claim to be like that of a tomahawk because of its shape. Well, to that, I digress. Because simply put, this blaster might as well just be the best of the best from the Ultra line as a whole. Of all Ultra blasters I've ever had the chance to talk about, this one really has had a lot of heads holding up high and a lot of questions. I, of course, have had tons of expectations when it came time to pick this thing up from Target while it was on sale. But I really have to mention that none of the things that most reviewers have put out were in any ways true because, well, simply put, that right there is one big lie. And then, of course, the fact is, this is where your trigger finger should be in, not outside. It's almost like that the Lord Draconical review was pretty much intentionally set up just to gain more views and to gain more clout online. Well, not on this channel. I'm a guy who's honest. This is a trigger guard. This is where your finger should be in, not on the outside of it. And then, of course, when it comes to the usage of the pump itself, I'm holding it like how I normally do. And, well, you can see that nothing at all from that video was happening on my Ultra 3. And there could be reasons to this. But for the most part, being an Ultra shotgun that has a nice long pump on it, a pretty lengthy profile in a way that is in fact built for most adult level people like myself, I really have to say something like this clearly is built for me. And when you compare it to most other blasters that might not necessarily have such a big capability like this, then well, you're probably missing out on a lot of details. And then of course you really gotta admit, 5 dart storage, able to easily reload this 8 dart inline clip that can hold Ultra darts of any sorts. Of course, we also cannot forget the fact that the Ultra line is capable of getting their darts up to 120 feet. There might be a chance where I might have to try a series dedicated to range tests based on Nerf blasters entirely, just to find out if any of these things are indeed true. But this right here is in fact probably the best of the best that we could have ever possibly gotten from the Ultra line as a whole. A shotgun blaster, this thing was definitely built for my type. And that really is saying a lot, but you know what? This really does bear so much on it that you can never actually ignore. And, well, go ahead and spend some good old money on this thing. It'll be totally worth it. Number 4, the Elite Infinus. Of all Elite blasters that I got right here, man, is this thing jam-packed to the brim pretty much. In spite of its bulky size, it's got quite a few amazing quirks to it and some rather interesting design cues and some rather clever integrations that have been put together into this. First and foremost, it utilizes, well, clip system blaster usage into it. And then of course, well, if you just heard that, this right here is how you can load darts into it, rather than the traditional way. The Infinus basically has one big thing to it already, which of course is motorized action. But when you really get down to it, a dart reloading sort of actuator that can be found on the inside really is quite an advantage. If you were to use this out in any sort of Nerf war, then your enemies would really tremble within you. The fact that you can reload darts just like this, which would be much more convenient, easy, and equitable than the standard sort of reloading techniques of actually coming in prepared with a bunch of magazines loaded to the brim, or of course, the usage of, well, this thing. So what's it gonna be pretty much? Well, simply put for me entirely, a balanced blaster of any sorts, with D batteries installed in the stock here, and plenty of bulkiness up in the front to evenly distribute the weight like it's nobody's business. Then of course, with full auto capabilities, well, it's quite obvious. You got yourself a blaster that's going to be totally worth your money at any cost. And then of course, to make it even more interesting, 2 tactical rails on top, and then a barrel adapter. How can it get any better than that? The usage of automated reloading, plus some modular techniques, really does make this the best that we could have ever gotten from the Elite lineup so far. But because the Elite lineup itself seems to have died out, all because of the replacement of the Super lineup, it probably does make sense that it had to go out at some point. Sadly, this could have been the blaster that would have ended it all, but it was released in 2018, 2 years before the beginning of this new series itself. Number 3, the Doomlands Desolator. Now let me tell you, the Doomlands series, as I've said, does have some pretty nice blasters to choose from, but if you were going to go into a store that had only Doomlands blasters in them of all Nerf blasters that would ever exist, then well, which would you come out of the store holding in your hands with? Well, my answer would be the Desolator. One of only 2 blasters ever released for the Impact Zone, which of course was itself a subsidiary of the Doomlands lineup itself. Because the Doomlands lineup consisted of color schemes usually considered of an orange and a somewhat yellowish orange, and then of course the black gray, and then of course there was a transparent plastic, which of course was non-colored, but this one's different. It includes orange, white, and black. That's pretty much it. And the transparent pieces are of course orange to be in line with the regular orange that's situated throughout most of the blaster. But of course, despite this, the Desolator really has a lot of unique quirks to it and some amazing things built into it. First and foremost, tactical rails. 1, 2. That's pretty much it, to say the least. But of course, this does mean that you can put on whatever you feel like. Dart storage, a scope, flashlight, whatever might seem fitting to you. The biggest thing about this though is basically, look at how slim this thing is. Like, this one's probably by far the slimmest blaster I've ever had that's larger in size compared to many other smaller blasters that may have much less of a width than this. But the width of this blaster is just incredible. How are they able to limit a lot of plastic, yet make a blaster large in size like this? Well, other than the Doomlands Desolator, I haven't really found many examples out there that are much like this. The fact that they can make a blaster so slim and so easy to use and handle, this is one of the lightest blasters I've ever held in my hands, which really does say a lot as well. Also, it has its own exclusive banana clip. Just like with the Elite XD Demolisher, or the Pulverizer from the Modulus lineup, which is basically the reskin of the Demolisher, it comes with its own banana clip, which can hold 10 darts in it, but it does include specialized impact zone sort of things built into it. Just to show you, this is made for the Desolator. And the Desolator, of course, utilizes motorized capabilities. And well, with that, I just breezed through the entire clip because when you really think about it, you could blaze through an entire magazine in just seconds by utilizing motorized technicians just like that. Motorized techniques, of course, are pretty much at the tip of the iceberg. You got yourself a jam door. You got yourself a battery compartment in the back, which actually fits AA batteries. And there have been a few other examples of motorized blasters utilizing AA batteries as well, but this, of course, was at the time one of the best examples, and this, of course, does lead it to be very lightweight, and therefore easier to handle, comfortable, and easy to use. The ergonomics in this blaster are just superbly well designed, and this, in turn, I feel like, was just designed for me. Indubitably. I couldn't really find any other major example of a Doomlands blaster that could have possibly been this good. I mean, the fact that even when you put down the clip release button and the clip itself pops out easily, that's another big thing about it. You probably don't have to worry about, let's say, the clip not falling out completely, because of course you could just go in, drop the clip like this, and then come in with another fully loaded clip in your hand. So this way, you don't really need a third hand to try and pull this thing out and drop it on the ground. So the fact that the clip releases this easily really does say something. So overall, phenomenal design in general. A rare example being turned into a huge masterpiece. Just like when I talked about the Ravenger earlier, that itself was an amazing blaster. This one right here though ranks higher than many, because of its much slimmer profile, its utilization of motorized power, which of course is actually quieter than many others, which I never suspected could actually be done. It could be something with the AA batteries or even something different. But anyways, the quietest motorized power that I might have ever heard in a Nerf blaster, the slimmest profile that I've seen in a medium to large size blaster like this, the usage of a banana clip, which at the time was a rare case, and then of course this being a rare blaster because it was only one of two of a certain subsidiary of a certain franchise of a certain toy brand that has since been declared defunct. So this is quite an accomplishment when you really get down to it. So that's all I gotta say right there. Number 2, the Modulus Mediator. Man, oh man. Could any Modulus blaster be better than this? Well, maybe not. But it's for good reasons. First of all, this is one of only a few examples that we got so far of a blaster with clip system integration that can be loaded from the side. The Raider and Rampage were some of the first blasters to do it this way rather than the traditional from below. And then of course there was the time where Hasbro has tried to do it from above with blasters like the Rev Reaper, for example. Even though I don't already own that, I can't really justify it for sure. But anyways, having a side sort of clip system integration, it might not be very appealing to a lot of people, but it can be very appealing to me. I do like these certain unique design cues that are put into place. I especially like how certain things are combined together. Whoa, that dart bounced up to the ceiling. Well anyways, this scope that I have integrated onto it for today does not actually come with this. I just have it on top of the Mediator because I do like this sort of appearance that it gives off. A Mediator with a pump grip on the bottom as a way to prime the blaster, some pretty satisfying gear action that happens, and then of course the nice pop that happens when the blaster fires a dart into the distance. I really just like how the scope actually adds a nice sort of aesthetic flair to it as a way to give out the fact that it just looks like something you'd probably see in a sci-fi movie in general. Something in the distant future. Like maybe something from District 9 or possibly even the more recent cases of the Blade Runner 2049 film, for the most part. Then of course you really got to take a look at this blaster's Modulus capabilities, which include tactical rails, in which case there's only two, yet again, a barrel adapter, and a stock adapter. The biggest thing about the Mediator though that I really like and compared to any of the other Modulus blasters is the fact that it comes with its own exclusive add-ons. But of course, unlike with such blasters out there that are from the Modulus series or otherwise, this can come on its own. And that can be really handy. If you're wanting to buy these pieces one at a time, you probably have to go onto certain places like eBay and the like. But when this was brand new, you could buy the blaster itself on its own. And like I said, it does not come with this scope, but this is what it would have looked like. It would have come with its own clip on the side, plus the blaster itself, with its unique sort of blue, white, orange, and dark gray and light gray colors blended together. Well, it's pretty much empty now, but... Whoa, where did that come from? Well, okay. Whatever. This also does have its own slam fire built into it. So, because I ran out of darts, I can't really show that off right now, but as I was saying earlier about how this came with its own exclusive add-ons to it, this included a barrel that could fire a shotgun blast, much like a master key, but that also could be used as its own blaster. It's gone unnamed, but I've called it the standoff. And then of course there was a stock which came with a little sidearm blaster reminiscent to that of the Zombie Strike Double Strike. That also has gone unnamed, unfortunately. So I've called that little blaster the Opposer. So, Mediator as the core blaster, a stock that includes an Opposer, which is basically Double Strike reskin, and a barrel attachment that can be detached and used as its own blaster itself. A standalone model called the Standoff. By me, of course. When all three of these are combined together, you have what is officially known by Nerf as the Modulus XL. And man, it's almost like combining all the Lions together to form Voltron, or maybe the many Transformers together to form Combiner Bots or Decepticons in a way. This really does give off that distinct vibe that has become popular with most pop culture. And I really like how you can actually put this together in reality and give off that same amazing characteristic that has made a lot of that stuff popular back in the 80s. Even though this was a 2018 blaster, again, another 2018 blaster, this really has a lot of amazing merits to it that I had no idea was possible. And I could never quite imagine how any blaster today could try to become better than this. Having two grips at once, slam fire, satisfying sounds, modulus connectivity including a barrel stock adapter, tactical rails, and the fact that this blaster comes with its own sort of unique add-ons that are exclusive to its own right because of this distinct sort of blue stripe that runs through it, that really is saying a lot. In comparison to many other blasters that I've talked about, sure, they are great for what they have, but this one seems to be better. Modulus connectivity and modular lineups as a whole are what I seem to like the most, with their own exclusive add-ons and accessories that really goes to show how creative you can potentially get. And creativity is a pretty big aspect that I seem to appreciate a little bit more these days, in comparison to how Nerf blasters used to be. They used to be all about fun, colors, and different types of ammo that are now considered vintage. For the time period, they were pretty well known. But nowadays, with Nerf being one of the biggest toy gun brands in the world, it's really no surprise that these things truly evolved into the things that they are. But yet, like I said, this is not the best blaster out there. So, are you ready for number one? Well, here we are then. Number one is, simply put, the Zombie Strike Contractor. Yeah, you might really think that I'm crazy with this one, but think about it. I've talked a lot about these other blasters, and they themselves could have been anywhere but number one. Because in all honesties, I never quite found these special unique merits that really could have given them the title of being the number one best blaster owned by me. But when you really think about it, this one actually somehow manages to do it. And there are a few reasons why that is. First of all, well, There are satisfying pump action sort of sounds and satisfying pop sounds that come from firing the blaster. And like the Negotiator, this includes an 8-dart cylinder, which also makes its own satisfying sound effects. And of course it can hold 8 darts, but when you get down to it, you have a tactical rail on top that can also serve as a unique carrying handle. A little small for my taste, as you can tell, but hey, whatever, right? Also, slam fire is involved in this blaster, so it's yet another example of a blaster that can somehow be better in so many ways. The biggest part about this blaster is the fact that it utilizes lights and sound effects. Of course, that's probably one flaw that I would disclose right away, because even though it actually comes preloaded with its own AAA batteries to be used, so this way you can get right onto the action with lights and sound effects, it's probably not necessary. It's like before when the Revoltonator had its own lights and sound effects that were pretty much unnecessary, but unlike with the Revoltonator, you don't need the battery power to operate this blaster. All you need is this and that, pretty much. That just sums it all up in a way. Got one more round left, and it's gone, pretty much. The color scheme is amazing. You have red, light gray, dark gray, blue, green, orange, some black, and some others pretty much. You even have a few parts that are transparent, such as in this part where some of the lights come up, in this part where some of the sound effects and all that good stuff will come up. And the sound effects do come from a small speaker built into the blaster somewhere around here, where it probably doesn't really matter much anyways. Well, anyways, the detail on this blaster is also pretty stunning. You have this side of the blaster, which includes its own sort of engraved tally marks. And then you have this side of the blaster, which has the majority of the detail all printed in together, including the special high voltage warning sign on it, the Zombie Strike logo simply put on here, and then of course you have the Nerf logo, which is basically one of the only cases that I've ever seen so far of a Nerf logo appearing in a different color while also appearing transparent. So it's barely visible in certain ways, unless if you were to tilt it away from the light. So of course it's dark enough so that you can probably see it from a distance. Overall, the Contractor really is quite a masterpiece. Despite not really having a stock on it, it more than makes up for with quite a nice, large, generous grip put onto it, and a trigger that can in fact fit 2 fingers on, but why would you do that? When you already have a handle that's big enough so you can have all 4 of these fingers, plus the thumb, wrapped around tight pretty much. And then of course this handle right here, made for priming the blaster, but being rather reminiscent to that of the Modulus Battle Scout, which was also turned into a battle camo blaster as well. But this sort of pump being reminiscent to that really is quite an amazing piece to hold on to while you prime the blaster. It's a bit ergonomic in a way. And then of course with the remainder of the other details, the nice sort of molding that's put together and the more complex detail that are shown in here, almost like they pretty much made this using a 3D printer with some complicated details. It does show that you have a blaster that's truly made for the masters. A blaster that can only hold 8 darts at a time, but can utilize some modular connectivity, with one tacked rail on top, which you can only use at a time, pretty much. But then of course you have all these other abilities, which more than help to make up for it. Nice ergonomics, comfy gripping, and decent capacity pretty much, which is very easy to load by any means. Satisfying sound effects, unbelievable color scheme, and so much more all get blended together into one unbelievably impressive blaster. And that is what I call an accomplishment by any means. So, You could probably look at it any other way. You might have your own number one pick, but that's more or less of your opinion. I go by the facts. And this blaster accomplishes way too much that how would I not put this at a number one spot? So that's pretty much just my take on that. And that is pretty much gonna cut it. But yet, I'm gonna have to do a top 15 worst Nerf blasters list. I know that for sure. So you know what? I'm gonna give it to you. It'll take some time pretty much, but I can tell you for sure that for something like this, I sure hope to have as entertaining of a top countdown as I could possibly put out there on YouTube. But for the moment right now, this is quite a big achievement. 15 different picks that I would probably never hope to give away, even if I truly had to. But I guess it all depends on what circumstances I might have in life. So anyways, that's gonna count for right now. And if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.